Ana, você não está em mute. Good afternoon. Pleasure to be back for yet another TL Talk. I'm losing count, but we're close to 30. Part of all of these things and these incredible silver linings within this new world that we're living, this storm that we're trying to survive here, is how we've been more connected in a way than ever before. And we've had over 30,000 views as we have friends and partners, old friends and new friends join us for a casual chat. And our objective is to send you a wave of positive energy and to give you a little bit of insight, a little company, a little laughter. Today are the leaders in our industry. So it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Tina Lira. I am the founder and founder of TL Portfolio, which is a PR and representation company throughout North and South America. And we have a team of 17 fabulous women, which I'm very proud to say are with us throughout this whole pandemic. I'm very happy today for those that have been following us. You see, I have a new background. I made it to Miami. So yesterday I traveled from Brazil to Miami. I'm posting it on our social media if anybody wants to know about the trip. And I have to thank the incredible team at East Miami, which is one of the most fabulous properties right in downtown Miami, for the most incredible stay. From the little details, we have a tent in the living room for my kids. It's just, little dinosaurs. It's like a playground. So thank you so much, East Miami. Thank you, Swire Hotels. You guys are fabulous. And I want to jump in and introduce this fabulous panel. I can't imagine having a conversation about a new North and a better tomorrow with, three more incredible people. And I'll start with Wendy Berg, founder and CEO of Cadence Travel. Wendy is a visionary. She's a leader in the industry. She founded the agency in 1995. And today she has over 150 people strong. So that includes all her travel advisors, her team, and of course herself as the captain of the ship. It's an incredible business and firm who has been nominated and voted best place to work for in San Francisco. Wendy, thank you so much for finding time in your very busy schedule to be with us today. It's a huge pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
My pleasure. I want to introduce also Pavia Rosati. She's the founder and CEO of Fathom. Pavia is an award-winning journalist as well, and Fathom is a travel platform with incredible insights. If you haven't visited, please do. It's a wealth of information. She's also co-author of an incredible book called Travel Anywhere and Avoid Being a Tourist. And it was already published in Canada, in the US, in the UK, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Germany, and France. Pretty much, like, if you haven't read it, what are you doing at these days, right? So it's definitely worth a read. She's also co-host of a podcast called A Way to Go, co-founder of a virtual conference that many of us, actually all of us here, were a part of, called the New Travel Conference, which was a 1 week long virtual connecting and finding new ways for the travel industry. So it's a huge pleasure to have you here, Pavia. Thank you for joining us.
I am so honored I'm honored to be in this company with Craig and with Wendy. And Tina, it's been such a pleasure to get to know you. And thank you for such a warm introduction. I'm glad it's so sunny because you can't see how much I'm blushing right now. So thank you.
No, it's, the problem is that I can introduce all of you and spend 60 minutes just talking about your career. So I have to try to summarize it, and it's not easy. And I mean, when you talk about Craig Reed, President and CEO of Auberge Resorts Collection, there's an example of somebody in the industry that we could just talk about for easily 60 minutes, it's not more. Craig joined Auberge in 2014. And prior to being with Auberge, he had an incredible career of over 3 decades, which makes no sense. Again, there's some mathematical error there because you can't be in the industry for that long and look so young. But anyway, you were with Four Seasons, and your last position was as president of hotel operations for the Americas, where you oversaw a region of more than 40 hotels and resorts and have created mountains with Auberge Hotels. So, Craig, Congratulations for your career. Thank you for being here with us. We're so looking forward to all your insights. So it's a huge honor.
Great. Well, thank you for including me, and especially with your other guests. And thank you for being so positive. So I really appreciate that.
No, thank you. And the way that I always start these panels and these conversations, and those that have been watching are already familiar with it. I'd love to get each one of you to give us a little glimpse into what this last few months have been like, right? All of our lives got frozen. We were all mostly stuck at home. And I'd love to hear, just a little glimpse of, what was it like? And most importantly, what was the silver lining? What did you take away from all this that's probably going to continue with you going forward? And maybe, Pavi, I'll start with you.
So on the one hand, it hasn't been radically different for me, to the extent that my husband, who's a writer, and we've stayed in New York City. We've stayed in New York City. I'm not in New York City. I'm at my friend's in my friend's barn out at the beach, which is a very nice place to be. But otherwise, we stayed in New York City. Half my building cleared out. The city got empty. New York City for many months felt like January 1st at 7 a.m., right? Like everybody's still sleeping. Nobody's out and about. So we were used to working from home. I don't have children who I have to homeschool. It just felt like an incredibly long weekend, punctuated with moments of incredible sadness anytime we would read the news, which was all the time. So the benefit, you asked for the silver lining. I'm not going to lie. I don't really have much of a silver lining. It's nice to be quiet. It's nice to feel the world being quiet. So I don't know that the silver lining is absolutely personal so much as it's seeing the world get quiet. Although, again, here too, right? Definitely a silver lining because it's all balanced out with happening in an environment of deep sadness. That's my way to start talking. I'm sorry about that.
No, but you know what? It's true. We're living a very delicate moment. It is. Yeah, there is there is a heaviness to the moment, and this is why this talk was created to have a wave of positive energy. If there wasn't this sadness, we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be here. But it's funny in that tone. When I was coming here yesterday, people are thinking, Tina, how is it to travel internationally? What was the airport like? And of course, there is that sad element that, my gosh, the industry is suffering. But in a way, it's like, wow, that must be, if you're like really important and they clear the airports for you and then they clear the whole, plane for you. And then you get there, immigration, there's nobody there. They're just waiting for you. That's kind of what it felt like. I'm like, I have to say, it was really nice in the sense that like you get the best attention and quick, airport. So, so that silver lining.
Yes. And you know what? Zoom is a silver lining, right? Wendy's in LA, Craig is in California. You've gone from Brazil to Miami. I'm in New York City. I'm spending so much time with friends who I otherwise wouldn't see. Oh, Darcy's in LA. Oh, Lisa's in North Jersey. We can't get together in person, so we don't get together. I've been spending so much time with friends all over the world. And I'm kind of like, why didn't I ever do FaceTime dates with my cousin in Italy all the time anyway? So that's been a good silver lining. This getting us to using the tools of technology to make us a lot closer to our friends wherever they are.
I agree. Wendy, tell us about your quarantine experience.
Okay, well, first I'd like to just say thank you for the opportunity to be here, Tina. Thank you. And I am so thrilled to be here together with Craig and Pavia, new and old friends. So thank you. The silver lining for us has really been that technology has been wonderful, but we know it's never going to replace the real face-to-face thing. So for the silver lining for me is, yes, thank goodness we can all stay connected such as we are, but this isn't going to be the new way that we do business. It's not going to be the new way that replaces us entirely from having true experiences and being places. So I would say that this is loud and clear, showing us there is no playbook on this. We're definitely riding a roller coaster. As you said, there is sadness. It's a Corona coaster, and you got to get off every now and again just to catch your breath. But definitely it is about knowing that this too shall pass, and we will have the great opportunity to be together again.
Very beautifully said. It's true. We can be connected, but nothing takes away the value and the impact of personal connection. Craig, tell us about your months.
Good. Thank you. Well, first of all, I keep waking up thinking it's going to be a dream, right? It's so unreal. And you know, I never thought I'd be 5 months into it thinking it'd be another 5 to 10 months, you know, that of impact ahead of us. But I wanted to share 3 quick little vignettes. First of all, the biggest silver lining is I'm once again getting carded. But earlier in my life, I got carded way into my 20s because people questioned whether I was old enough to go into a bar. Now I'm getting carded because I go to Whole Foods at 7 in the morning, and between 7 and 8, they allow people who are 60 and over, and I just qualify. So fascinating, just that dynamic. But, you know, just in that little moment, I've gotten to know everybody at the supermarket, including the policeman at the door who cards you. And it's incredible how everyone's been brought closer during this process. And yet we all respect the various restrictions, the spacing, the mask, the disinfectant, etc. There's some tough moments, though. You know, I went to visit my mother in England 2 weeks ago, and I had to stay in a guest cottage, and we met outside, and she wanted me to sit, you know, about 1.5 meters away. And of course, I didn't feel comfortable doing that because there's no way I wanted to infect my 88-year-old mother. And so I sat about 10 to 12 feet away. And it just made me reflect on how difficult it is for people of her generation and how patient so many people in that generation have been. And then probably the bit that was the most inspiring component for me was a week into it, just before the start of April, we sat down with our investor and kind of reviewed what a conservative scenario might be and a really bad scenario might be. And we listened to, he listened to our feedback, and the next morning he sent me a note, and it was a note of inspiration and basically encouraged me to only think through the filter of coming out stronger. You know, that time would progress. And it really was a fabulous moment because it sort of helped correct my compass point. And it made me think less about the journey into trouble and more about the journey out of trouble.
That's such an important point and such a helpful correction that I think all of us can make sure we do every morning, because it changes your mind frame. It changes, you know, your course, exactly as he says. And I have to thank also Wendy, because I started, you know, every time I start thinking of a new panel, there's one person that's especially influential. And I called Wendy and I said, I want to do this panel. What are we going to talk about? And then I took some of Craig's words into, you know, setting a new course. And here we are talking about, you know, setting a new course and about making a better tomorrow. And it was very funny because I was, you know, reading about all of you and putting these questions together, as was my team. It was super helpful. And when I went on Amazon and I was reading the reviews of Pavia's book, Travel Anywhere and Avoid Being a Tourist. And Amazon defined it as, along with compelling anecdotes, suggestions, interviews, and incredible imagery, you'll find a clever approach to being a better traveler and a global citizen. And I thought, wow, that's exactly what we're talking about. So here we are. We have Pavia on the call. We have a theme that she actually wrote a book about, in a way. And so I'd love for you to set the scene. What does that mean to you?
First of all, again, thanks for mentioning the book. Geraldine and I, my business partner and co-author Geraldine and I, are working on the second version, Travel North America and Avoid Being a Tourist, right now. So really thinking about this. Being a better global citizen, which is something we focus on so much at Fathom, really means moving through the world with an open mind and an open heart, right? I always say travel is the guaranteed cure for xenophobia, for closed-mindedness. If you get out of your own space, you will come home and you will emerge a better person. And, you know, I think the really important thing is to take personal responsibility for this. So much of what happens in the travel industry, and especially in the luxury travel industry, is all focused on customer service, over deliver, What are the wow moments? Let's stun the clients, client service, right? And that's great. But let's flip that around for a second. What about the responsibility that travelers have to the places that they visit and the places that they go and the places that we work in? We don't hear enough about this. I hear a lot about spoiled travelers, selfish travelers. What I want to turn around to say, you whiny baby, someone woke up at 5 o'clock this morning to walk to a hotel so that you could have fresh squeezed orange juice when you demanded it at 7 a.m. I mean, think about this. Imagine if we all take better personal responsibility and make sure that when we're traveling, we're giving back, either through giving money to the places that we go, bringing pencils and notebooks to maybe a community or a small town that we're visiting that doesn't have them, that doesn't have access to this. It can mean giving money back to the community that we're in, right? One of our writers talks about the humanity tithe. She makes sure that she pledges 10% of what she spends on any trip to giving back to the communities that she's visiting. Think about that as a framework for how you're going through the world. And so on the one hand, yes, it's important to do this when we're traveling and when we're in Sri Lanka and when we're in these beautiful places. But I also think it's important to do it at the grocery store with the person who's checking out our groceries. I mean, it's kind of what Craig was saying. He's gotten to know the people who are taking care of him in small ways. So being a better global citizen means moving through the world in a way that is generous and open-hearted with a smile. And I'm sorry if that makes me sound like a Hallmark card.
No, it's so apropos.
It is very true. I was actually, we have started a partnership with a great YouTuber, which is another, people are like, oh, you're on YouTube now. So it's like, let's partner up. And her name is Emily Schmidt. And we were talking yesterday about how travel originally, or yesterday, let's say, was one way, exactly as Pavia is saying, what am I going to get? What am I going to take out of this trip? Right? Everybody goes, and what is it going to give me? And it's that movement of, what if it's a two-way exchange? What if you ask yourselves, what are you going to give them? Why are they going to benefit from your trip? Right? Exactly. If you look at it that way, it changes the whole dynamic, which is very interesting. And thinking about that, I'm so fortunate to be stuck in the middle of these incredible minds. And I had a conversation with Wendy when we were putting this together. And we were talking about the importance of, looking at travel in a different way and taking the silver linings and reevaluating everybody's role in it. And as, the owner of such an important icon in the travel industry, she was talking about, the question being, what is your value proposition? She says, that's something we all as businesses need to ask ourselves. What is your value proposition? What is your business model? And Wendy, I would love for you to talk a little bit about that. And you mentioned also, the need for a professional fee. And so if we put all that together, the last question is, why now? Why is now the time to reevaluate all this?
Because people value what they pay for. And once again, we look at ourselves in the service industry as giving and doing and wowing and creating these moments and these experiences. And I think now at this time, we get to reinvent and refresh how we're doing business and look at the real awareness around us and to say, what are the pieces and parts that I really want to be doing? Right now, none of us are really doing what we have been doing. We've been given an opportunity. This is our opportunity to really reflect and to really look at our industry as looking at us as a professional business and knowing that while giving him more time means that we need to be paid for that. And knowing that that has a value and people value what you pay for, and knowing that that's readjusting our thoughts and readjusting who we want to do business with and how we want to do business. And it's about creating trusted relationships and knowing that you're checking in with your customers, because in order to remain relevant, we're going to have to keep the communication open with our customers to ensure we know where they are, because currently they're all over the board. Some are willing to jump on planes and some are only willing to drive places. So we are going to remain relevant by spending the time and taking our knowledge and our wisdom But first, it starts with self-care. And that really is the most important thing that each and every one of us as travel advisors in this industry need to know, is that we've given our hearts and souls and been on that fast track and fast motion, and having the ability, the silver lining, once again, to be able to slow down. Number one, to count the blessings that we do have and to look forward at what it is that we can put out there in a way that we wish to do. There is no playbook. So we are rewriting this story as we go, and having a value proposition for who we are in the industry is going to take us. If we don't know what our value is now, then we'll never know, because this is the opportunity to do so.
Fantastically said. And it's so funny. I was having we call it Zoomer time. We do these calls with 10 or so top agents per region. And we had great ladies yesterday from Furlan Fox and great agencies in Argentina. And one of them mentioned something that I think goes to your point. She says, Tina, before we had an issue with over-information. So we were trying to get our clients information, and well, they're getting it from the internet and they're getting it, from the hotel. And it was just trying to speed to not lose that client. And she says, now suddenly the clients are so lost. Nobody knows where you can go and what's the best rate and what is it safe, that suddenly we became such a trusted source of information. And there's more value than ever before on your travel advisor. And so it's exactly as you said, it's the moment to make the most out of that and say, look, there's a fee to this. You don't have to read any news. I know, I'll tell you where to go, where to stay, where it's safe, who's going to pick you up. Forget about trying to work out, from the news and the heaviness. And so I think you're right. I think there is that moment. And I think a lot of travel advisors are questioning and looking for that way. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's important. And again,
Tina, I would just say that often these crises accelerate a trend that is already there, right? And what happens is, your margin of error disappears during the crises because everyone's reevaluating things. There's more duress, but the whole paradigm of how we compensate expertise was already changing. And I think that's very bold of you, Wendy. So good for you.
Yes, I agree. And I think you're going to, again, lead the way to a whole industry. So that's very exciting. Craig, we did a little research and I was really happy because usually when we find articles that, our speakers were participating in, they tend to be like a year ago, but not so much material that happened during this pandemic. And you were asked in a recent article, what was your current goal in the current situation? And to successfully navigate. And you said, what was your goal? And you said to successfully navigate through the unforeseen and being patient enough to allow others to be on the same page. And I think that's a brilliant answer, but it's a lot of information in there. So my question is, what exactly does it mean? How do you define successfully navigating this storm? Because it's so hazy that sometimes you don't know if what you're working on or what you're doing is actually taking you on the right direction.
Right. Well, there were two parts to that quote. First, the gauge of success. And we measure success on three fronts. We measure it in terms of how we connect to our guests and or our travel partners. Secondly, we measure how we connect with our team members. We call it the Auberge family. And then lastly, how we connect with the people who own our properties and the investors. And so in each segment, for us, success was really to outperform because if there's less to be had, then what you're hoping to get is more than your fair share. And or if it's difficult times, what you're hoping to get is happier people on your team than in other teams. So that was how we gauged success. And we actually broke our team down into three groups, and each group focused on one area. And we felt that there were different tensions, and it was better to have people focus exclusively on one topic so they're fully attuned to that topic. And then just open dialogue. We're not the judges. We're being judged. We've been judged by our team members. We're being judged by our guests or our customers. and we're being judged by our owners. So that addressed the first piece, and so far so good. And then the second piece was, ours is a people business, and as such, it's like being a team sport. And one of my favorite movies to reference is Braveheart, and because of my Scottish heritage. And I always think of Braveheart with his blue face paint, telling his fellow Scots to charge the Brits. And imagine if he'd run down there and his fellow Scots hadn't followed, And what you have to do is you have to go as fast as the slowest guy on the team, right? Meaning that you have to bring your team with you. And one simple example is as we reopened the properties, we started reopening early June, and we were fully open except for the island properties by the 1st of July. So here we had our hotels, and we had teams at the hotels. They were there. We'd sent clear messages to any employees: if you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to come back, and we'll keep a place for you when you come back, because maybe they had a personal situation, and or maybe they were fundamentally uncomfortable. But what I noticed is a number of my corporate team weren't comfortable going to visit the hotels, and it sort of reminded me of those sort of old classic war movies where the generals, stood back and didn't fight with their troops. And I thought, no, we must fight with the troops. We must be there. We must be seen and be visible. And I could see how it was uncomfortable. It was more uncomfortable for anybody in a city where the issue was a bit more focused. And that prompted me to, I'm just going to get in my car. And I drove 4,500 miles. I just went from Dallas to Austin to Santa Fe to Santa Barbara to Napa to and by the time the trip was over, it took me 2 weeks. I noticed most of my corporate people started to travel, right? But I had to be patient and allow them each to get there. And maybe there was a little bit of guilt, and hopefully there wasn't too much guilt, but it was subtle encouragement. That kind of answer it?
Yes, no, it does. And I think you bring to a point that is what a lot of people are feeling right now, because everybody wants to know when is the right time to travel. And it's such a personal thing, especially for a lot of people in the industry where you're thinking, well, I'm a travel advisor, I'm a restaurant owner, I'm a hotel owner, and maybe I'm not comfortable because I have a family member or just because I'm not ready for it. And it's very important to maintain that patience, as you said, and not. And again, as travel advisors, that's a big issue, is how do you motivate your client without feeling like you're pushing them beyond their comfort level? And it's so hard to know, and it's so important to have that sensitivity. Yeah. So it's not easy, and I think Pavia did a great job. You were co-founder of the new travel conference, which was an incredible success. We were all part of it. And I wanted to ask, as co-founder, if we were to grab your conference and squeeze the juice out of it, right? And I'd like you to think about, what did it teach you? What insight did you get? Because there was so much content. There were so many people involved. It was fantastic. You guys were the first one off the gate, in a very interesting time of this pandemic. So give us a little summary of the best takeaways.
So thank you. I'm glad that you were part of it. If it was a good conference, and the feedback that we got was that it was good, it was because of the participation of the three of you, of companies, like Auberge, who said, we want to be part of this. We want our voice to be heard. For those who don't know, the idea behind the New Travel was born from a weekly call that I started the first week of the pandemic with other colleagues in travel media, some publicists, some journalists, a few travel advisors I work really closely with. And I just said, hey, the world's going to hell. Do you want to talk? And that call kind of became a weekly thing. I call it Travel Media Check-in and Cheer Up. And it started with 8 people, and now 80 people get the email, and it's kind of like a happy hour. It's come if you want to. And like happy hours, there's a core group. And at some point, somebody said, let's do something. Let's do something to help. What can we do? And that simple question led to the New Travel, which was a conference designed to help the industry recover from COVID and chart a course for a brighter future. And we brought together travel companies, hotel companies like Auberge, but also cruise lines and just tech companies with travel advisors and travel journalists to just share news. And we did everything over Zoom, which worked really well. We had no idea who was going to show up. And we ended up with 1,500 people total participants, which was great. And we had industry presentations and then panel discussions around topic like what's high touch service in a no touch era? What's the future of food and beverage? Things like that. So it was very interesting to hear all these different voices from all over the world talk about this. And there were three takeaways. One, and some were surprising and some weren't. The surprising thing was how many people who are hardcore travelers, define themselves by their travels, said, it's kind of been nice not to travel for a few months. We all move so fast, so furiously, that we end up losing out on a lot of things, moving at such a fast pace. And so many people said it was nice to slow down. You know, yes, it's a little boring, but there's something kind of nice about sitting in the stillness and sitting in the boringness. I mean, I'm trying to learn how to meditate. It's actually happening, right? Mm-hmm. So the second thing that was not surprising was that everybody seems to be very focused. And this goes back to Craig's point earlier about the trends that were in place before the pandemic will only be accelerated by it. And that is, we should travel less, but we should travel better. We should travel with more purpose. We should travel with more focus. We should spend more time in places as opposed to kind of running around to check off a Google spreadsheet. You know, and traveling for the Instagram, that is not traveling the right way, right? That's traveling to be great. So slow down, travel better. We all saw the photos of the swans and the dolphins in the Grand Canal in Venice. And I mean, at this point, it's a cliche, but how striking was it to see that? Yeah. We've seen what happens if we take the responsibility to have less impact on the world. Imagine if that was the norm. Imagine if that was the reality. And so that brings me to the third thing, which was not surprising, but which was revealing, which is how interconnected everything is, right? Yeah. So we all know this. It's a small world after all. We know this. It's a cliche to say so. But if we think about the ripple effects, I mean, COVID began in a market in China, like a market that otherwise we might go to and take really cute tourist pictures of to put on our Instagram feed. Look how picturesque this market that I'm in China is. Well, this is what a negative ripple effect could look like and how interconnected everything. However, a ripple effect that was positive. Again, if we flip that, imagine if with smart leadership and careful stewardship of our tourism centers, of our environments, imagine if we magnify an impact that was as positive as COVID has been negative. That, for me, was a real lesson from the conference, imagining and giving everyone the challenge of being that positive and effect on the world that you move in.
Yeah, no, and this imagine if, you know, is an important exercise to do. And I think it's also about, you know, it's something that we try to do here is to not try to predict and just create. If we could create the future, if we could do, you know, imagine it and create it, you know, invent it, what would it look like? And if we imagine it and we can create, anything is possible, right? We don't have to try to find the answer. We can just create it. And the word that always comes to mind when you think of that is innovation. And I'm going to go back to Wendy, because again, our talk was so important to me because, you know, in our discussion, you said something, and I have to thank you because it was an advice, or I don't know if you meant it as an advice, but I hugged it as an advice, and I've already implemented it in my company. And it's allowed me to come up with some fantastic initiatives, which I would have never possibly been able to do if it weren't for you. So one of the things that you mentioned was that, you know, you believe in harvesting incredible ideas and initiatives. And you said that 10% of every team member should dedicate their time, 10% of their time to innovation. And when I thought about that, I'm like, wow, if I had every team member stop what they're doing, it doesn't matter what job they do or what role they have, think about the company and how to innovate. That could be interesting. And it was, you helped me, you know, do amazing things. So how did you come up with that? How do you implement it? Why 10%? tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, so thank you. It's one thing to allow yourself some time to connect with your goals, your ideas, and your professional development. But it's another thing to create a space where you totally unplug so that you're given a space where you can think about the what ifs and the why nots. I have found that the most important leadership principle for me has been to surround myself with amazingly smart people, empower them, nurture them, and give them the resources that they need, and then get out of their way. And being able to do that, because there are far too many examples of the opposite. You know, we want our people to thrive. And in order for them to thrive, they need to be empowered, to give them autonomy to be able to discover. And so we've gone to a 4-day work week. We ask them to unplug and not check messages. We really want to give them the opportunity to really have that downtime. When we start our meetings, we talk about what's going on in their world. And really, it isn't about me telling them what the new ideas is. It's about sharing with each and every individual and giving them impactful ways to connect to their clients and really over communicate, because I think that that's essentially the most important thing we can do right now, is to connect to our clients and our colleagues to find out where we are, because everybody's in a very different place of comfort during this. So it is essential to say, okay, turn off everything that you're thinking about right now, turn off your day-to-day busyness so that you can really get in touch with yourself and think about the what ifs.
It's so brilliant, because you also delegate the thoughts. You know, you're able to delegate the navigation of the course of the ship, you know, which is incredible. So when you're able to pass that big job responsibility onto other team members, it's amazing what they come up with. You know, I was so impressed at how it's a simple idea, and when you implement it, brilliant things come out, and you're like, "Wow, I never thought about that. That's brilliant." You know, and I think it's motivating for the team. So it's a really great concept that I recommend everybody implement, regardless what you do, and even in your house. You know, like let your kids come up with ideas. It's funny when you get, you know, delegate that. Great things come out. So thank you. I have to thank you personally for that. It's helped me tremendously. Craig, I wanted to ask you a question, because you had this incredible career with Four Seasons. You were president of operations for the Americas. And then at one point you decided to join Auberge. And of course now, you know, people look and they go, of course, Auberge, you know, it's a brand. I've spoken to a lot of travel advisors when I was thinking about these conferences, and Mickey actually from Pro said, you know what, one company is leading the way that you have to have on your talk is Auberge. And so I thought, wow, what an incredible thing to be at the helm. But it wasn't that big and well known when you joined it. So why did you decide to take the jump? And, you know, tell us a little bit about the process, and then, you know, how you got it to where it is.
It's great. Well, thank you. Well, first of all, Wendy is to blame because we were actually at a gathering on the island of Lanai with Wendy and a few other of our colleagues who were part of our advisory board. And we were asking these great partners of ours for input on how we strengthen what we call our emotional connection to our customer. And some of the feedback we got is, you know, hey, we really love you, but we kind of love other people a lot too, you know, and they sort of tuned into some of the feedback that we were getting, and it was all about intimacy, sincerity, one of a kind, bespoke, and that phenomenon was manifesting itself in so many different aspects of life. You know, so my children, who were avid Starbucks consumers for many years, all now had their own bespoke coffee maker where they would get the coffee, and you know, one was organic, and that was my more bohemian daughter, and the other was precious, and that was my less bohemian daughter. But right about the same time that, you know, the company was going through some transition, so I figured one way or another, I'm going to be working for somebody new anyway, you know, and I'm basically going to be starting a new job. And I met Dan Friedkin, who is our majority owner and really the sort of visionary behind the concept. And I shared some of the findings from that gathering. And I just talked about bespoke, one of a kind. And he said, great, let's go start a hotel company. And you know, I was a 30-year guy, right? So I was thinking, I'm going to retire here. And I said, well, are you kidding me? You know, and he said, no, let's go do it. And he said, what would you do differently? And I said, well, interesting enough, you know, when I go to London, some of my favorite hotels, the Beaumont, the Connaught, they're more bespoke, they're intimate, they have personality, they have leaders, they're very connected, that have their own interpretation. And he agreed. And then we talked about, do we go with the family name or do we go with the first name? You know, so do we use the name of the brand or do we give each property a great sense of individualism? And that sounded a little bit more risque, but when I first joined Auberge, and I've already dated myself based on being carded, I sort of shared that earlier. You know, when I first started, I worked at the first North American US property that ran by Four Seasons that took the name of the brand. And they had other properties. They had the Ritz-Carlton Chicago, the Pier in New York, the Clifton San Francisco, etc. And so the whole idea of giving an individual hotel a family name started becoming vogue at that chapter. Of course, now it's prolific. And our thought was that the pendulum would change. And I threw that out to Dan. I really hadn't given it too much commercial thought. It was more of an emotional sentiment. And he loved the idea. And we looked around for a company that gave us a small platform to start with. And we found Auberge. And they, ironically, were at a time of transition. They were great envisioners. They needed a little bit of management capacity behind them. And so we made an initial investment. We now own the company outright, and we've tripled it in size and have another 10 properties under development. And it's been fun. And the whole notion when we first, you know, are you going to call every property this? Seemed very foreign in the early days. And now we're growing at a very fast pace. And it's because it resonates with the guests. It actually resonates with the employee as well. They want to be part of something that's more bespoke. But it's resonating with the investment community. Not to say that where I came from or what I came from was wrong, but rather that this is a new niche that we felt could be tapped into.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I'm going to just pick on Wendy a little bit. Wendy, if you were to go, if Craig were to invite you to a similar brainstorm session, right, today, what has changed, or has it not? The recommendations that you thought of this bespoke, of the personal, not more of the same, has anything changed since then?
I for one would have probably the same conversations, and Victoria and I would be together, right, and we would be in front of Craig and letting him know that keep it authentic and keep it sincere and keeping it real and raw. And at the end of the day, it is about trusted relationships. It is about authenticity. And I think everyone in the travel industry is finding themselves in this place of feeling raw and real. And how are you going to remain relevant? And part of that is the authenticity and the emotional connection.
And I think, Craig, what you said, that you hadn't thought about the commercial side, but it was an emotional thought. That's probably the key element, because so often we get so distracted with the commercial and you end up going with something that maybe it doesn't move you emotionally. And sometimes that's one of the reasons that it doesn't go as far as you wish it had. So I think that original emotional that feeling is so important. Pavia, I'd love for you to ask the next question. And I know you have an incredible career, you know, with a news platform, and I'll let you carry it on. I know you have a question for Craig, but I want you to elaborate it.
So yeah, we talked about this during the prep, and Craig was not allowed to answer the question so that he does it fresh.
Yes,
so,
I want to know the answer.
So I was saying that before starting Fathom with Geraldine, we worked at a website called Daily Candy that a lot of people don't know about anymore, but it was very important at the time. And when I started at Daily Candy, I was the first editor they hired. I ran the editorial team for many years. We were really small, and we were only in New York City, and we were considered cool. And then we got bigger and we got investors and we were growing and we were in more cities.
Very cool for that matter.
Well, thank you.
Very cool.
And so what started, though, as a small thing for 60,000 people was suddenly going out to 3 million people. And the question that we used to always ask ourselves was, how can we stay cool even as we're getting bigger and even as we're expanding? And Craig, this is an interesting inflection moment for Auberge because you are expanding your footprint from the US, you're investing heavily in Europe. How do you think about this notion of staying bespoke and true and small, which I know is such an important guiding principle that every one of your hotels have a strong sense of place? How do you balance that with getting bigger? Because a follow-up comment there is we're living in a moment where brands, which used to be really valuable, people are kind of feeling a little anti-brand, right? People don't necessarily want their labels to be as exposed, as obvious. So while there's a comfort in knowing who a brand is behind a product because it gives you a sense of the quality, of the consistency that you can expect, and of the security that an experience will be delivered, whether that's in a pair of shoes that won't fall apart or in a hotel room that you know will have a comfortable bed. At the same time, everybody wants to feel like everything is unique and never been done before and special to me. How do you balance these competing forces?
Yeah, it's very difficult. And I'm grateful that it's very difficult because, quite frankly, it's a barrier to entry, right? Barrier to entry. And it's been a test for a lot of our team members. And it's had us a little bit on the right profile of person that we attract to our team, starting with myself, because I'm absolutely not cool, But
I beg to differ.
Give yourself some credit, Craig.
I beg to differ.
But I'm surrounding myself with some very special people. And interesting enough, the objective was always to have a big platform, right? So the objective was always to try and provide scale, but the objective was to try and protect the originality at the local level. And in fact, Wendy and Victoria, in part of their feedback, they gave a reference of a property in Nicaragua called Macul. And that was one of the first properties I went to visit once I formally decided to leave Auberge. And I met the family, and the family are very wealthy. So I quickly realized it was an emblem of honor for them, the property was. It had to be deeply Nicaraguan. And so the last thing we wanted to do is sort of accentuate an American connection or a big brand connection. And then he had, as you had mentioned earlier, Pavia, Mr. Pellis understood the whole importance of supporting the community. So when we made our pitch, one of the first things I made in the pitch is, I'll volunteer to teach classes in hospitality at the University of Managua, and we'll do things for the local community. And really what that conveyed to him is that we get who you are. It's your hotel. It's not our hotel. We think it really important. Now, the trust wasn't always there. And I had a very humbling experience a month in. I felt I've got this great 30-year career with this fabulous brand. I started at the bottom, worked my way up. And, like I was it, and I met with a developer at San Francisco Airport, Mark Cooley, who's the owner of our Chileno Bay property and helping us with our second property in Mexico, Susurros. And Mark looked at me and he said, "Can I just tell you something?" And I said, "Yes, please do." He says, "I'm really worried that you're just going to be too corporate, And that was a month into it. And it was a phenomenal soundbite for me to receive. So what we've done in terms of composing the team is we've got artisans, but we also have people who can manage scale. And ironically, it has been easier for me to keep the artisans on track than get the people who manage at scale to understand the importance of the artisan component. But it's a phenomenal team. We've got 2 or 3 really brilliant creative people. We've infused the team with younger people. And my job really is to facilitate that the core message come from the artisans, and then that the people with leadership and structure, with a background in leadership and structure, honor that artisan spirit. And then that feeds back into the individual property, where we want our general managers to really be connected to the guest experience and to be hosts. And we're trying to determine what are the things that we want to pull away from them. And we had a great brainstorming session at the Lodge of Blue Sky last December, 2 days heated on the role of the general manager. And basically it was reverting that role back to much more of the local host. So far so good. What's interesting is it feeds on itself, and I've lost control, so meaning that, the artisans now are really have a loud voice in our company. Secondly, the people who are choosing us, we can't attract a big investment type groups, thank goodness. So we're attracting high net worth individuals for whom the property, they want it to be their property, not our property. We're simply their managers. Now, we have long-term relationships, and I think we've convinced them that we have a culture that will keep reinventing itself. And then lastly, our employees at the property, they've bought in hook, line, and sinker. So the minute I try to tell them to be consistent, forget it, right? They want their personality. So our Austin property is a little bit irreverent. It's Austin, right? It's got a liberal swing. Well, our property up in Maine is very, very different. It's a bit more traditional. And each one, I have 3 daughters. One wears black, the other wears pink, and the other one just flip-flops and a T-shirt, and each 3 of them are their individual personality, but they're reeds.
They have a root.
They have a root.
No, they have a root. And I can tell you, when you set that idea and you have that mission and it's very clear to the universe, yes, you get very cool people. Not also, as you said, you start to attract very cool. And you mentioned Blue Sky. I have a dear friend, Stuart Campbell, who is phenomenal, and he is probably the coolest guy in the industry.
Right.
So if you want to stay cool, if anybody doesn't know Stuart, he started this cooking program during the quarantine, and it's the funniest thing. It's like a comic. It's satire. It's just hilarious. So you do have, I think people at the end of the day are what makes the magic, right? I think yes. Wendy mentioned at the beginning the power of connection, and Pavia mentioned at the end the silver lining through technology to be united. And I think it's exactly as you said, Craig. At the end of the day, if you have that embedded in the DNA of your people, they take over. You don't have to. You're still at the helm, and of course you're leading the way, but they do it naturally. So amazing, incredible job. And as Nikki said from Pro, it is definitely one of the brands to look up to and leading the way in travel. So it's very exciting.
Well, thank you. And it's early days still, but the thing I feel proudest of is the profile of people that we're attracting. And we just have lovely people. There's a young lady who sells for Hawaii that Wendy knows really well from her past. And when we recruited her, you just recruit someone like that. And Wendy just said, I love her. And then I can sell the hotel, right? So it's a people-driven business. And we love Alyssa as well. So.
Yeah, very true. And I always end these talks in the same way. And I always say, if everybody that's listening to us for some reason were to forget all the incredible content and insight that you've shared, what would be your closing message? What would you like people to remember? It's Friday, end of a busy week. And very often when you connect and you give somebody a little message, it kind of stays with you the whole weekend. That conversation that I had with Wendy has stayed with me for weeks. I think about it all the time. So if you could leave a little seed in people's minds, what would you like to leave behind? So Pavia, I'll start with you.
Start the ripple effect of goodness.
Wow. I agree. I'm on that bandwagon. I'm totally like, I'm trying to push a wave here. But I couldn't agree with you more. Beautifully, beautiful.
Thank you.
So Wendy, what would be your message?
Start your day with thanks. Think before you think. Start every day being grateful and keep it real. Keep it real and keep it raw, because that's where everyone is, and stay connected, true to yourself and how you're going to be on the other side of this, and stay connected to your clients, to your colleagues, but to yourself first, your own oxygen mask on first.
Yes, I think about that all the time. And I always tell my daughter, do you know why they say that when you're on a plane? You know, put on your oxygen mask first. It's so important, because if you're not healthy, if your brain isn't, you know, you're not feeling great, then everything around you can be great. And I think you're right. And when you're grateful, suddenly you're aware of all these gifts that you have, right? And then it's so much easier to continue on a positive day. So brilliant message. I couldn't agree with you more. Craig, I let you close off our session. No pressure.
Thank you, Tina. And by the way, you'd forewarn me to make sure you have a couple of messages in case somebody else had the similar message. But positivity is fundamental. But conviction, I think, is very powerful. And in the movie A Darkest Hour, Winston Churchill, you know, when he is trying to rally everybody in England at the darkest moment in the country's history, he first of all starts off with says one bond unites us all, right? One bond unites us all. So I think we have to work as an industry, because we're trying to shift things. And Pavia, what you did is you began to unite us. You began to gather people and to look for excuses. And that was a formal venue for sharing, but from it came a lot of informal sharing. And then Winston Churchill goes on to say, conquer we must, and conquer we will, right? So we all know, especially us seasoned characters, we've gone through pretty tough times before, and we know that the sun will shine again. And, you know, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So in these tough times, we rethink. And I'm so proud of what I'm seeing from other folks, including you, Tina. You know, just the whole idea that you're organizing us. It's a Friday afternoon, and I was really looking forward to doing this. And your message is one of positivity, but it's also about a better tomorrow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you. I got goosebumps. Thank you so much. And it's, you know, it's true. I think what all of you said is true. And there's no doubt that we're going to come out of this stronger. And if we look at every crisis in the history of humanity, around the corner, there's a boom. There's a huge boom waiting to happen. And we just have to keep thinking and staying on top of it and staying positive, and we'll get there. And then it's going to be fantastic. And with that note, I wanted to thank you so much for your time. For everybody that's listening, that was able to take some time out of your day to join our little chat, thank you so much. The idea here is to get this message, this wave of positive energy, to as many people as possible, because I think that's what people need. So if you liked it, please share it with your friends, subscribe to our channel. And again, thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you, Pavia. Thank you, Craig. Thank you for everybody that's listening. Have a great weekend. And
thank you so much.
Great day. Enjoy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Travel, it's a people business.
Every human being with any type of skill set.
The ultimate bosses are going to realize they need change.
Be transparent and respectful.
But they're going to need different people.
To another type of professional occupation where the demand has survived.
It is the responsibility for everyone who's on that team to drive home all of those qualities.
Just keep doing and stay completely optimistic. Things are turning, and I know there's only good things in store and great things to come.
The first time I interviewed with the head of America, she said, Tina, we know retail. You know who buys us. You know how to take care of him, how to speak it to him.